what's goodies in these hoodies? It's a KSHMR Felix No touch bass tutorial. We're using Reason. Here on the screen, if you look, I've got my MIDI down here for the bass, and we've got KSHMR's bass and Felix No's bass in the red. And I'm going to solo the KSHMR bass as we play the track with my recreation inside of it. So we're just going to A-B it real fast as we do at the start of every video, so you know if you're going to stick around or not. And then we're going to walk through the whole shebang. So here we go. Okay, so it's really close. It's like a 9.5 out of 10 on the MPTutorials rating scale, which is very robust, and it's used all over the world. So it's really close, and I'm pretty excited to show you guys how to do it, because I like showing you guys cool things. It's why I do this. So here we go. We're using Reason 8.3, I believe, but that doesn't really matter. We're using Reason, and we're using a bunch of rack extensions. Not for fun, because we actually need them. To pull this off at a 9.5 level of accuracy inside of Reason, we need the D filter, we need the Ubic A reverb unit, and we don't need you can use another phaser if you want. I just use the Ubic P. So yeah, those are the rack extensions we're going to be using. We also use Pulsar, but that's just an LFO. You can route a Thor and use one of its LFOs or any other instrument if you wanted to. But that's what we're going to be using. It'll be very apparent why we have to use them once we get into the tutorial. So let's not waste any more time. This is going to be like 30 minutes long. Let's get into it. Here we go. We're going to reset the patch here. And here we go. So, first thing first, whenever you're going to start reverse engineering or recreating a sound from one of your favorite songs because you want to learn and you want to do whatever you want to do, you got to get the notes right. Okay? You got to get the MIDI in there, and you got to get that shit accurate. Because when you start A-Bing and you're listening to what's going on, those notes got to be right. Otherwise, your brain and your perception, it's going to be totally way off the mark, in my experience. So that's my biggest piece of advice, is to get the notes in there first. Because it's going to help you with the recreation, and because it's going to, you're going to learn about song structure, songwriting, chord progressions, notes, what works, what doesn't, because you like the song in the first place. So really useful. Make sure you get the notes right before you do anything else. So once the notes are in there, we're sitting down, we're recreating a sound, we're thinking, okay, where am I going to start? In this case, we're listening to the sound. Let's listen to it really fast, the original sound. I hear a lot of things happening in here. I hear reverb, I hear a very percussive kind of quality, which adds to the groove of the track, which makes the whole thing sound cool, makes the whole thing work, that very percussive kind of quality. And I'm hearing a very bright, distorted, kind of in-your-face, very spectrally rich kind of sound. So my brain's first thing is, I'm starting, where am I going to start? I need an oscillator, I need a sound source. Unless this is like Brain Feeder, Arca, or Lorne, or something, very cool and off the beaten path kind of stuff. We're probably not dealing with sampled kind of content here. We're probably dealing with square waves and saw waves, and that is the case here. But my initial thought was also that maybe we need FM because this is so bright, this is so in your face. Maybe we need some FM to bring out some of that really cool spectral content. So I spent a lot of time futzing around with that and realized about after a half hour that this was not FM at all. This was much more simple than that. So I loaded up a Thor to start, and that's what we're going to be using here because I was ready to use FM capabilities if I needed to do so, which I did not end up needing to do so. So it doesn't really matter. All you need is a synth that can do a saw wave and white noise, pretty much. That's all you need for the bass oscillator of this sound. So to set this whole thing up, we're going to get rid of the filter here. We're not using any of Thor's filters. We're only using it as a sound generation source. Put that bad boy in mono. This is a bass sound, so it's probably going to be in mono. You can set your range up to 24 so you can do some cool pitch wheel bends kind of stuff. It's going to sound really cool when the whole sound is done. And I'm just going to set this up as it's going to be in the patch that you're going to download it. So route out all the oscillators through both of the pathways. You know, filter 1 to amplifier, filter 2 to amplifier to the out of Thor. And the reason why this is set up like that in the original patch is because I was initially trying to use Thor's filters to get the sound, but they're just not good enough, so that's why we had to use defilter to get the sound we were really looking for. So we're going to start with Oscillator 2 because that's where the main saw wave comes from. That's really where the whole shebang comes from, is Oscillator 2. The saw wave that comes out of Oscillator 2 is the main timbral element that shapes the whole rest of the thing going on. And the reason why we're using a wavetable oscillator instead of the analog oscillator is because the wavetable oscillator, as I've mentioned in other videos, wavetables are essentially samples, and samples have the same phase position start time every time you trigger them, so we actually want the machine gun effect here. Every time we trigger the sound, we want it to hit off at, I don't know, 0 degrees phase or whatever the hell it's shooting off at, it doesn't matter. Then we're going to layer that really, really subtly with like this super not detuned multi-oscillator, which takes 10 saw waves and stacks them on top of each other so you get this really weird kind of sound. But the truth is that when we use the mixer knob and we shoot this bad boy up to like 100, which is where we're going to have it sit, we're not really hearing a lot of Oscillator 1. And this is more of just an early experiment that kind of just stayed in the patch, which isn't really significant to the main patch of the, or the main sound of the patch. So really all you need here is Oscillator 2, but Oscillator 1 is just like an extra little goodie that you can mess around with. What we definitely do need though is we need Oscillator 3. And Oscillator 3 is going to be a noise oscillator, and later on in the patch, once we add something like distortion to this sound, that little bit of noise, which we're going to bring Oscillator 3 here down to 15 dB lower than everything else, that little bit of noise, when it gets run through distortion, is going to really set the whole thing off in a cool way. It's going to make the whole thing sound kind of gargly and bigger and more badass. Way more badass. So, and this is a trick you can use on any sort of lead or bass sound or any sounds. A little bit of white noise goes a really, really long way. And I can prove that to you in a second. So let's actually get rid of the white noise for now as we build the rest of this, this patch. So as you can hear in the original sound, there's that really percussive kind of quality. Now that percussive quality is being accented by the side chaining of the bass, but the percussive quality is extremely important on its own. Like, it wouldn't just be there if it was only getting sidechain. There's a percussive quality built into this patch, and we can add that to our patch really, really easily. And the first way we're going to do that is we're going to take the mod envelope and we're going to route it to Oscillator 1's pitch and Oscillator 2's pitch. We're going to use a value of 90 here so that it really does like a crazy kind of pitch modulation here. If I bring this amount down to like 1.5 seconds, for instance, and we play it back, you can see it was starting up like around 1 kilohertz and shooting down to the bass notes that we're playing in like the 50 hertz range. So it's a really, really huge kind of pitch drop. But when we bring it down to a really, really short value, like 77 milliseconds, and play that back, Sorry, Ableton sucks. Oh my god, Ableton, you're the worst. You'll see that on those in-between notes, which are right here, these percussive kind of notes that fill in the gaps, we get this really cool percussive smack around like the upper mid-range lower mid-range really, like 1 kilohertz right around here. And that's a huge part of the sound. And it's all done with this little mod envelope. We can accent that even more by messing with the amp envelope here and having our amplitude decay over half a second to 6 dB lower than where it started. And now this is how, you know, drums or percussive instruments behave. They're very transient. They have strong transient properties. And we've added a strong transient property to our synth now by modulating the pitch and modulating the amplitude over a very short time frame to give it a smack. It smacks you in the face now. It's got a lot of impact when it hits. And that, in the composition of this song, where those percussive shindigs in between the actual bass notes are so important, this is huge. The white noise here, as you'll see, is going to even accent that even more, because percussive and drum instruments are not tonal in a lot of ways, not harmonically related in the upper harmonics and stuff like that. It's a lot of noise, and we're adding that here too with our noise oscillator. So really, we're on our way. You know, that's already a cool sound in itself, but we're gonna make it way cooler. Okay, so now it's time to do some filtering. So for the filtering, we're gonna load up the D filter. I love the D filter. It's so freaking awesome for this kind of shit, where we want to do these crazy kind of movement, interesting bass lines or lead sounds, anything. It's great because it gives us these totally flexible, awesome bandpass or notch filters. The band stop mode, which is what we're going to use, is going to put it into notch filter mode. And we're going to just create a nice little notch for ourselves here. So this one's going to be around like 258. This one will come down to like 1K. We're going to set the roll-offs here to 96 each so that they're really, really sharp and really, really pronounced. We're going to take our filter output and put it to clean. We don't want any sort of limiting or weird dynamics processing kind of stuff happening to our patch in the filter stage. And then we're going to add some resonance to this bad boy. And the resonance is going to accentuate the filter cutoffs at 1K and 250 here. And it's going to give us boost around those areas and make the filter more pronounced, more noticeable, more... You get the idea. So now, if I play this and move the filter around, we're going to start to hear some really cool stuff happening. Except, out of bad habit, I held down Shift when I created this device, so it did not automatically route, which I have just fixed. So you can hear that as I move that filter around, which is just a notch filter, a custom notch filter that we've created, which is why the D filter is so awesome. So awesome. Because we have this custom notch filter that we adjusted the cutoff frequencies of both ends, the resonances of both ends, the roll-offs of both ends, and then we can move around that custom shape however we want across the frequency spectrum. It gives us this really cool kind of interesting movement, which is leveraged in the KSHMR bass. But it sucks if we got to do that ourselves, right? We don't want to sit here and move this thing around or draw fucking shitty automation. So we're going to load up an LFO here. And this LFO is going to go into our dual knob. And now look, it's moving around on its own, but it's moving around real crazy, okay? Really, really crazy. We got to bring this bad boy way down. We just want a little bit of movement. We want the rate. We don't need that stuff tempo synced. It's just it can do whatever it wants. Put it at like 2 hertz, no problem. And then we get this. So I like this really, really subtle movement, but maybe we want it to, get a little bit crazy sometimes. Well, we can do that if we add some CV merging and splitting, but really it's just going to be merging here. We're going to merge both these LFO signals into the dual knob. And our second LFO signal, we got to turn that bad boy on. We're going to make it real slow. And we're going to have it kind of just, every once in a while it's going to nudge out of the safe zone. So it's just going to get a little bit crazier, sometimes. Because now we got these two conflicting rates happening, and it's more random. It shoots around a little bit more. It's more interesting movement. So great. We're on a really good start. Really, really good start, guys. I'm proud of everyone. Okay. Okay, so now it's time to add a homemade dimension expander. Yes, from Massive. We're going to recreate the effect of the dimension expander, because if you listen to the KSHMR bass, it's wide across the stereo field. And right now, our bass is not wide. It's very, very not wide. It's 100% mono. But we're going to add some stereo-ness right now by creating a reverb unit that only utilizes early reflections on a super-duper small scale, which is going to shoot the sound into both of our ear holes and create a nice little stereo effect and widen that bad boy up. So the way we're going to do that, and the reason I'm using the UPIC A here, is because I can literally say I only want early reflections. Put the operation on small so that it's really, really early reflection-y. The size of these early reflections should be also very, very small. And then we just want to mix it into taste. I put it at 10% because I really just wanted that little bit of width that's going to pop out. No bass, even though I'm pretty sure these parameters are only on the late reflections, but I'm just going to leave it here, just in case. So this is basically a dimension expander from Massive, where you just have that early reflection reverb that can widen up a sound. And that's pretty much what we've got here. Okay, awesome, 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 awesome. So once we have our dimension expander set up, I took it upon myself to run this whole bad boy through a vocoder. We weren't even hearing the dimension expander because I was a fool and was holding down shift as I created it again. So let's listen to it again really fast. Sounds great. Sounds great. Now we're going to add one of my favorite things to do with basses and leads and whatever else, actually. It's always a fun thing to do if you're bored or you want to add a little bit of spice to something that's not so spicy. Throw on a vocoder and put it in equalizer mode and play with these bands. The FFT is not going to do shit because it's an FFT, but these other ones are going to alter the timbre of your sound. So the 32 band, the way the vocoder works, we got 32 serial bandpass filters, and that just creates this kind of like interesting sound. If you run something through a bunch of bandpass filters, then you're going to get a different kind of sound out of it. That's the bottom line. And that's what we're doing here. So I put it in 4-band mode. It just adds a little bit of something. It's so subtle, but it's also so not subtle at the same time. it's so subtle, but it's also just like, it's so not subtle, and it's so great. Okay, so that's what we got going on here. It's always a nice little thing to do. Just adds a little bit of something. And now we're going to bring the whole thing together by giving it some distortion. A little bit of distortion goes a long way, and that's what we're doing here, a little bit of distortion. So we're going to run this whole thing with the white noise and the filter and the vocoder. Those three things are going to come together now and run through this overdrive setting with the tone all the way up and the presence all the way down. The tone is going to make us, feel real bright. The presence all the way down is not going to add any weird kind of ampy, cabinet-y, resonant kind of filters in the upper end of the spectrum. Keep it nice and clean for us. And this is going to set the whole thing off now. Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, so now you pretty much have a lot of the sound done now, and now we're going to get into some of the nitty-grittier kind of detail work that's going on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a reverb unit onto this sound. So we're going to add a reverb unit to the sound, and the reason why we're doing it inside of the patch is because at the very end of the patch, the whole thing, reverb and oscillator included, get a phaser thrown onto it, a real subtle phaser, which is a real nice effect. So we're going to do the reverb inside of the combinator itself. So to set that up, we need a line mixer, we need a reverb unit, and we need an audio merger splitter. Because our main sound that we've got so far is going to come in here, it's going to get split to an output and into the reverb. And the master out is now going to go into our combinator input. Okay. So the other thing that we have to add here is the reverb in this sound is actually sidechained to the instrument, which is something that we've done in other tutorials. And I'm just going to go over really quickly right here. But basically what we're going to do is the reverb is going to be sidechained to the instrument itself so that whenever the bass is playing, the reverb gets ducked underneath it. So that keeps the sound source that we're interested in really intelligible and dry until it's no longer playing and we get a reverb tail that follows it. This is great for vocals, it's great for leads, it's great for basses, it's great for anything. It's a really cool effect. And it's basically the main element of the Sun and Moon tutorial that I guess nobody was interested in watching. That's also on my channel. So here we go. To get that going, we're going to load up a compressor because we need to do sidechain compression so that the reverb unit is in the compressor and the original sound source, right? The original sound source coming out of our spider merger splitter is now the sidechain input of the compressor. So for the reverb, I decided to go with a plate reverb with a decay time of a little over 4 seconds and no high frequency damping. And now to set the compressor up so that it slams the compressor every time the bass is playing, we just shoot that input all the way up, threshold all the way down so that no matter what, it's going to trigger ratio all the way up so that it slams the shit out of it and leave the attack and release where they are. Now this is going to sound really bad until I turn the reverb down, but just listen to it. So as you can see, every time the bass was playing, the reverb was not. But we're going to turn that way down to like 10. It's real in the background here. Fantastic. And the last thing we're going to do, which is going to be also really subtle, but it's in the original song, is we're going to take an LFO unit and we're going to put it into the pan of this reverb so that the reverb slides around the stereo fields. Put it at a synced rate. Bump up the level here. And now that reverb is going to be shooting around the stereo field in a real nice kind of way. Okay. So now the grand finale is this whole conglomerate, reverb and original sound source included, get run through a phaser. So I used the Ubik P because it's just better than the stock shit in Reason. Here it is, Ubik P, here's our phaser. So now, just to reiterate, the reverb and the original sound source are now running through this phaser, which just adds another set of movement to the sound. And just to backtrack for a second, I fucked up. The reverb here needs its own filter. This is my bad. So the reverb here is now running through the filter before the compressor. And the reason that we're going to do this is because we just want to carve out kind of a mid-range feel to the reverb. We don't want it to be too bright or too dark. We just want it to be just like I've set it up here. We just want to carve out this space here from like 400 to 5 kilohertz. Okay, so with that out of the way, I'm sorry about that. So just to reiterate, because I fucked up, the reverb goes into this filter before the compressor. And then this LFO modulates the pan. Okay, moving on. We've got the oscillator and the reverb now running through this line mixer. And this line mixer as a whole, taking those two combined signals, is running through this phaser. And this phase is going to add some real subtle phaser movement to the whole sound. And I'm talking real subtle. 14 stages, bank sanctuary on high, so nothing in the bass frequencies get fucked up. Feedback on 0, nothing crazy going on. We're going to bump up where the spectral focus of this phasing happens, just a little bit, like 6.2. We're going to move the depth down to a little bit above, like 25%, like real subtle phaser movement. You know, I was in line. And then we're going to tempo sync it, real slow. Nothing crazy. And then we're just going to bring the mix down to like anywhere between 20% to 30%. That is totally up to you. And now is when we actually have our full completed sound. And with that in place, you can add some other extra steps which are in the patch that I provided as a download, which will get it even closer to the original sound, because these next optional steps are really mixing parameters, where we get rid of all the low end here with a high pass filter with our D filter here. And this can be done with any other high-pass filter, but it's just like at around 100 hertz. We just get rid of everything below it because there's a huge sub-bass in the track. And then we add a nice little EQ. To boost up the high end at around 6K. Perfect. Hey guys, so quick update at the end of the video. There's one small change that you got to do before it feels 100% right, which was not in the last run through of the sound that we just did. So the patch is exactly where we left off just now. We just got to go back up to the top into Thor and bring the release time of the mod envelope below the decay amount. This is going to make those percussive hits deeper in pitch sounding and much more accurate and more punchy. It's way more what we are trying to achieve here. So let's just quickly listen to that. Watch as I pull this down, the percussive hits start to sound better. So this is a really weird thing. You'll notice this if you have pads or something, and it's kind of hard to explain, but let me know if you have any questions in the comments on why this is happening. It just has to do with the release time not making sense on a time scale with the decay time. Yeah, I don't know how else to explain it besides that, but you adjust that release time and your patch will sound a whole lot better with the percussive elements. So if we lay it into the whole track together. One last time for the run through. Here we go. And that's our patch, dudes. I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry for that fuck up at the end there, but hopefully it doesn't ruin our great time together. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one.